Hello again. Welcome to Discovering the Real God. And I'm starting a new series today on the subject of divorce and remarriage. The study is intended to bring out truth. I've been looking at the subject. I believe I've received revelation on it. And first of all, I have to say that we're looking to bring out truth, and truth can often be painful. We know that. Change is painful, truth is painful. The truth about ourselves is very, very painful. So I know there'll be people watching the video who have gone through divorce and separation, and or divorce and separation. Even though things might be painful to hear for those affected by divorce and separation, this study is intended really definitely and certainly not to bring condemnation, but hopefully it will bring some closure and some healing into your situation if you have been through this particular trauma in life. So I believe I've got a message from God on the subject for those who are affected. And as I say, I may say some things that are very difficult to listen to, but there is no condemnation coming from me. That's what I want to say first off, for those who have experienced divorce. Nevertheless, some things might be unpalatable. My friend Maurice Barrett, who has been a Bible teacher many, many years, when he's covering a tricky subject like this, he often says that I might make you sick, but after I've made you sick, I'm going to give you the medicine to make you better. I think that just about covers it, really, and that's all I want to say. So please hear me out, hear it to the end, and I hope there will be something in it for you to bless you, certainly not to bring you down. Well, having given you my opening remarks, I think that what we have to do is start again going back to the beginning, which is something I always do when I'm studying the Bible. I don't know about you, I always look at the beginning of things, and I want to look at what marriage is. When did it begin? I think it's pretty obvious really on this subject that the first married couple were Adam and Eve. There was no formality there. There was no wedding ceremony or anything like that. God created Adam and Eve to be together, and he simply brought them together. There was no candidacy for marriage or anything like that. He said that a man and a woman will leave their families and they'll come together and become one flesh. That's one in relationship, as I have said in previous studies, but not in authority. The man is head over the woman. That's the order that God made it. That's not what I'm bringing to the table. It's what God said. And so the relationship is equal. The man has his views, the woman has her views, but the man has to lead, and that's what it's about. The other thing I'd like to say about the marriage of Adam and Eve is that there was a prophecy there, the fall of man, as it's referred to, when Adam and Eve sinned. That was a prophecy. The first Adam was a prophecy of the second Adam, who is Jesus. So Adam was not deceived. Adam was not deceived, and he ate the fruit knowing what would happen. If you look in 1 Timothy 2:14, it will tell you that Adam was not deceived. Eve was deceived by the serpent, but Adam was not deceived. He ate the fruit, fully knowing the consequences. And why did he do that? Because he loved his wife, and he didn't want to lose her. He'd fallen in love with his wife. It was part of him. It was like losing a limb, if you like, and he just did not want to go through that. So rather than suffer the loss of his wife, he accepted death, because he would not have died if he'd have been in the garden with the tree of life. He would have stayed there forever. But he chose death. He chose the suffering. He chose to go and till the ground with the sweat of his brow, and he chose all the vile things and the curse of the earth, and that his wife being cursed over her childbirth, in preference to being on his own in the garden. Jesus gave up his life for his reward, which is his bride. He didn't do it. He did it out of obedience, of course, but he didn't do it to save the world. He did it for the reward that his Father was going to give him for his obedience. The Bible tells us he wouldn't pray for the world. God loved the world. But Jesus was obedient to the Father, and then went to the cross and was exalted to the highest place and received his reward, his bride, which he's coming for, I believe, very, very soon. So I don't want to get into that because we've covered that subject before. But there's nothing further in the Bible, as far as I can see, really. We can see that men and women were married, given in marriage, and all the things to do with marriage, but there was no details of it. The first time we can see anything like that is when we come to Isaac and Rebekah. We know that Abraham sent out his servant Eliezer to get a wife from Abraham's own people. He didn't want his son Isaac to marry one of the local girls. In other words, he wanted to continue with his family, and so he sent to his family the servant, and he was to come back with a woman who was willing. Now, he was off the hook if the woman wasn't willing, but it seems that Sarah was very willing to go, and God had ordained it all, and he came back with a wife. And just as they arrived, Isaac had gone out to pray, and he saw the caravan train coming, and it was told to Rebekah that this is my master's son. And she alighted from the camel, it says, and put on a veil. Isaac met with her. He took her into his mother's tent, and they were man and wife. I mean, the rest is left to our own thoughts on that, whether they spent several days courting and getting to know one another before the sexual act took place that made them man and wife. I mean, that's just conjecture. We like to think there was some courtship there, and so on and so forth, and that Rebekah was at least introduced to her new father-in-law, but we're not told any of that. It's just left to our imagination. It says he took her into his tent, and she became his wife. They became one, in other words, by sexual union. And it says, thus Isaac was comforted over the loss of his mother. So there's no formality about marriage. It was simply that many cases the family would choose a wife or a husband, and they would do the negotiating and that's how it became the popular thing, and often is in other countries. We know that there is arranged marriages still goes on, and it's their way, their choice. It probably was in this country originally, but the difference is that they say that they get married and fall in love. We do it the other way around, fall in love and get married. So it's a matter of what you think is right. Perhaps parents have got more wisdom, perhaps they haven't. I don't know. It doesn't really matter, but that's the way it was. Now, polygamy was allowed up until the present dispensation. I can't actually see where it is actually being formally forbidden by God. But clearly, when the law was given, God began to speak about the negative aspect of having more than one wife. One wife may be despised and the other loved. I mean, if you look at Jacob, you can see their situation. And, you know, one wife could be despised even while the other loved. And God pointed that out, and it became more and more obvious. And as they came into the New Testament, there were still people then with more than one wife. It was quite obvious that in the New Testament that there were people there with more than one wife, because it talks about the bishops and the leaders, the deacons of the church, having to be selected of men that were but one wife. And I don't think that's talking about divorce necessarily. I think it's talking about polygamy in that case, that they have one wife, and because it was preferable, and it became more and more obvious to those as we received the Holy Spirit and we wanted to go God's way, that this was God's ideal. We're talking about the ideal now. We've come to that place in the New Testament where Jesus sacrificed his life and has brought us into what should be the ideal with God, that we commune with the Father through Christ and we follow the precepts of God because we love him, not because we're forced to by the law, but because he has written the law on our hearts and we want to follow him. So we follow those precepts because we believe it's the ideal that God laid down. So the legal aspects of marriage did progress as we got through towards the law and further advanced. There was a kind of a legal aspect to it. In fact, it was a bond. And the bond was the betrothal, not actually the marriage. A man was betrothed to a woman because the family had arranged it and they were betrothed to each other, and that was the contract, if you like. It wasn't the actual marriage, it was the betrothal. And in fact, if you look at modern times, more modern times, not particularly these days, but in the last, let's say, probably 70 years and longer, the betrothal was the contract in this country, because there was such a thing as breach of contract. If a man and a man and a woman were engaged to be married, and one of them broke that contract, then there was a legal case in some cases. Obviously amongst those, the wealthy, not amongst the working classes, but amongst the hierarchy of this country, there was a breach of contract, and it was very, very serious. So we can see that from that, the biblical principle, if you like, or the principles of Israel that came across to us into our law that we have a breach of contract. The ceremony in those days was not a ceremony in Bible times, if we like to put it that way. It was simply a feast. There was no formality. Maybe there were speeches, I don't know, but there was no formality. There was nothing like there is today. It was the Catholic Church that brought in the formality. In 1215, when a priest was then called to legitimise marriage, or hand fasting as it was referred to back in the day, it was only, of course, for the well-to-do. It was for those who had a position in society. It was not for working class peasants. It was simply for those who were important enough to be recognised that they go through this ceremony, as it was. The Reformation of the Church interfered with that somewhat, but the Protestant doctrine came in very quickly, and then the Protestant ministers were called to officiate at a marriage with a ceremony. As time went by, the Marriage Act of 1753 formalised churches in the religious dictates, and marriage was enshrined in law. We have to go through this to get to the nitty-gritty. I think we need to know the background of marriage before we can start dissecting things. Again, it was only for the rich. There used to be an exchange of gifts amongst people. We know it to be the ring, the wedding ring nowadays, but sometimes it was a coin split, and one half of the coin was given to one candidate and the other to the other, male and female, and other gifts went down in value as we reached the people who were at the lower end, if you like, of the social strata. Over the years, the marriage ceremony grew into a very, very formal, enshrined in law ceremony, which is mostly, I have to say, religious claptrap. And I'm sorry for saying it like that, but if you dissect it, that's what it is. It's got nothing to do with with the relationship with God. In that sense, all the formality, I don't really think God wants that. He wants our hearts, and he wants our hearts, a man for a wife. And the oath is an oath because of desire, of love, and of passion. It's not a formality. I promise to do this, and no. I don't think that's really where God is. He wants the commitment. I don't mean that. He wants the commitment, and he wants the commitment for life, because that's how he ordained it, and he wants that to be recognised by the candidates. But someone standing at a pulpit, formally dressed, saying words over people, that is not really anything to do, I feel, with the real act of marriage. That's only my opinion, but it's just religiosity, and the Christian religion is as bad as any other religion, if you like, because it's not about relationship with God. So, a man and a woman come together in a lifelong commitment, and it's now been, I believe, twisted and messed around with. It's all about control. The religious church has brought about the formal marriage ceremony as an act of control, and it's been legalised as an act of control. And that's the way I see it. So the next time we'll start to look at the very contentious issue I feel, in church of divorce, and see where that takes us. But for now, that's the introduction. I think we've gone far enough in the first session. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.